If you see on my box, it's the top left, Ellen Dudley is here, and our guest speaker is Nora Youssef. Ellen Dudley is a realtor, and she's sponsoring this series, a 5-part series, and she's going to introduce Nora. And Nora graciously has come here to speak. And if anyone after the program is interested in connecting with Nora, Nora put her contact information in the chat, so you can go through the chat. Only if you want to, no obligation, but her chat information is there. And if you ever want to call her or email her, it's in the chat. So let's get started. Today we're talking about downsizing and about financial obligations and financial issues. And Nora's the expert. And here's Ellen Dudley to introduce Nora. So thank you, Ellen, so much for sponsoring this series.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Ellen Dudley, and I work for Keller Williams Real Estate, which is the largest real estate company in the world. We have offices in pretty much every state in the country, as well as overseas in many countries. And if you ever find yourself downsizing and want to move anywhere, anywhere, we can help you find a good agent. So keep that in the back of your minds. I am so pleased to be sponsoring Downsizing Your Home so you can upsize your life. This is my passion, is helping people do just that. You know, why do you want to be out there shoveling today or paying someone to shovel when a new family would love to come and form roots in Newton or our surrounding communities? And if you don't know where to go, we are here to help. So Nora, I would like to introduce Nora, my first guest in this 5-part series. Nora is a 3rd-generation financial advisor at the Empower Wealth Group of RBC Wealth Management. She was honored as a top 40 under 40 professional by Boston Business Journal, as well as by her industry, for going above and beyond to serve her clients. She has presented on personal finance and investments for over 300 organizations and frequently contributes to TV and radio shows. And if you join her Facebook page, you can see recaps of her videos. Welcome, Nora. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ellen, for having me. Of course, part of what I do is connecting people with their village and equipping them with great contacts like Ellen for people who are downsizing. So thank you, Ellen, for having me. Thank you, Tracy. So for everyone here, thank you for those of you who have your cameras on. It's helpful to be able to see your reactions and expressions. And if there are any confused faces, I'll know to stop and re-explain things. So thank you. Oh, and I see some more opening up. Thank you for that. So the purpose of the next hour is to make this really meaty and inform you and have you all log off all the wiser. Now, of course, I don't predict the future. No one can. We don't have a crystal ball, but I'm here to help you see the future with some clarity. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start off explaining the context of the economic environment we are in. So I'll give you some nice little takeaways for you to know in the back of your mind. And when you're talking to family and friends, you'll sound much more educated of what's going on. And I'll also, of course, relate it to real estate for those of you considering to make any real estate moves, including downsizing. I'm actually going to share a case study for you, a real client of mine with a very similar situation, and the leverage she was able to establish through downsizing, and ultimately explain how everything affects you. Bottom line, how the economy and real estate has an effect on you and your personal finances. Sound good? Okay, I'm seeing some nods, good. So, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. So by all means, get those questions going. I want you to get the most you can out of this. Let's have this be as engaged as possible. And I have my contact information in the chat box, and you see my name there. You can also just Google it and find my contact info. If you have any follow-up questions and complimentary reviews, I always offer to all my seminars. If I touch on anything that you say, ooh, that was really good, I want to dig in more and see about my personal situation, great. It's a free, it's complimentary one-on-one session where we can dig in and get some questions answered for you, Okay. All right. So with that said, we are going to delve right in. Hope you all have a nice beverage next to you. I've got my hot tea here. So first and foremost, we're going to start with context. What the heck is going on out there? It's certainly anything but boring. And so, as we know, of course, with this coronavirus business hitting in March for the most part in terms of affecting the economy, we had what was called a V-shape decline and recovery. Okay, the market went down 34%. It was ugly and nasty, and it had a nearly mirror image recovery in the third quarter of last year. And so and we're trudging along quite nicely now. The Fed is very accommodating, adding money to the economy, buying up bonds, also known as quantitative easing. That's the fancy term for that. Essentially, they're just pumping money right into our system. So acting as a bit of a steroid for the economy. Stimulus package and checks are keeping most businesses and families afloat. Us consumers, we're at our best savings rate in decades. And that's because incomes are increasing, and well, there's not so many ways we can be spending our money, right? We really can't go anywhere safely. So we have this pent up money being stashed away, and of course, some pent up demands. If you ask all of us here, I know we're all climbing the walls to get back out there and return to normalcy. So we've got an interesting state here, a holding pattern. And I also want to point out the consumer, us consumers. We are the most important part of the economy because we make up 70% of the GDP. So the more we spend, the better the economy does. And us consumers are actually the richest we've ever been. And that comes from, part of it is real estate, which makes up about 25% of people's total assets. And also the stock market, which is flirting around all-time highs. So we're richer than we've ever been. We feel more comfortable to spend than we've ever been. And of course, we've got this pent-up demand. So the second half of the year is looking pretty good in terms of corporate profits, in terms of getting the economy stimulated. Next, we've of course have the taming of COVID-19. Now, with the has anyone on this call been vaccinated yet? Show of hands. Ooh, a couple. Okay, nice. My grandparents are going this week, and we're at Fenway. I'm excited for that. Excellent. So that, of course, is helping things. We've got the 3 big vaccines out there. We've got Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca. Soon, we've got the J&J vaccine, which I'm most excited about. It's one vaccine. For those of us 65 and under, that's likely the one you're going to get. It's one shot, doesn't need to get refrigerated. It's not mRNA, it's more typical virus vaccination technology that goes into it and doesn't need to be refrigerated. So there's that, and also the Novavax vaccine as well. So we're lining up nicely for vaccines to get this virus behind us. And so the fear is going to be subsiding, especially for the older population as they get vaccinated. 16% of the population is 65 plus, and that 65 plus population, they're accounting for 80% of the deaths. So as we vaccinate, especially the older population, 65 plus, the fear is going to subside. All right, so in short, the outlook for the second half of the year is looking quite good. Now, let's put our attention to real estate. Well, real estate right now, we've got a beautiful housing formula. There's not much supply, with people being fearful of moving in the context of a virus right now. And yet there are people wanting more space. So you got some supply and demand is in your favor if you are wanting to put your house for sale now. And rates are staying well low, at least for this year. The Fed is saying they're going to keep rates low at least until 2023. It may be shorter, especially when that pent-up demand comes in and you've got a line out the door. You know, when that happens as a business owner, how can you not raise prices to make up for lost money? So inflation may kick in sooner, but as far as the next year comes, as far as 2021 is concerned, you know, it's feeling pretty promising that rates will continue to stay very low. In fact, fresh off the press here, the latest rates for a 30-year fixed mortgage is about 3.125 if you're to refi. If you're buying new, it's 2.875 or 2.75. Okay, so really nice rates, meaning money is cheap. And if you can put down 40%, you even get the best rates possible. So the context for real estate is looking really good to get the most value possible in the longest time here for your home. Okay. All right. I'm just scanning here to make sure there are no questions so far. Okay, I see a few. We're going to circle back to those in the Q&A. Okay. This is finance, and yes, we're also going to talk about how it relates to downsizing. Okay. All right. So that's the context of things. Now, a very common question I'm getting when it comes to personal finances and your decision of when to sell and downsize. Again, I am leaning, for the reasons I just mentioned, to downsize now if possible, especially if you've been vaccinated and you're safe to make a move like that. 2, if you have a mortgage, certainly refi while money is cheap right now. And this is one of the few times ever really I've suggested, if you've got a mortgage, there's that old question of, do I pay off my mortgage or do I go ahead and take my savings and invest it? Because, and I rarely say this, but because money is so cheap right now, I actually lean towards investing the money because odds are likely on average, you'll get better returns than the 2.875% you're paying in your mortgage. Now, if you downsize and you can pay off that mortgage, hey, all the better. And we're going to circle back to a case study of a client of mine who did just that. And you may be in a similar boat and perhaps considering that option. Real quick, if you have any tax questions, we'll also cover that in the Q&A. I don't want anyone to fall asleep on me, so I'm going to just save that for the Q&A if you have specific questions on that. If you're selling a property or your primary residence and you want to minimize your taxes, there are some ways to do that, and I'm happy to cover that as well. Now, before we get into the base case where you may be able to relate to my clients, for those of you with your investments, it's really important. This past year has really showed us the importance of diversifying, right? Not having too many eggs in one basket, because those people who are properly diversified track the market and recover faster and sooner than those who are not properly diversified. And when I say properly diversified, people say, yeah, I get it. Not too many eggs in one basket, not rocket science. But I'll tell you, so few people do it correctly. Oftentimes a couple came in recently and the husband said, yeah, Nora, we're good. We have 5 mutual funds. We're diversified. Well, as it turns out, I dug into those 5 mutual funds. I peeled back the onion. And what do you think happened? All 5 were invested in very similar investments, all invested similarly. So they were not at all diversified properly. And you want to be participating in all market segments, meaning big size companies. So the big S&P 500, the largest companies in the United States, like Facebook, Amazon, Google, all companies you've heard of. Medium-sized companies, which finished off the year last year in 2nd place. Small-sized companies, which finished off last year in 3rd place. A little bit of corporate real estate, and some international exposure. And of course, what keeps you safe and afloat and acts as your life jacket while you are in the ocean of the stock market investments is your fixed income, which is the safer stuff, like bonds, like CDs. Yes, rates are low, but it keeps your money safe. And the more of that you have, the safer your overall investments are, okay? So you want to watch that. You also want to watch and make sure your level of risk is appropriate. A lot of people had heart palpitations looking at their statements in March and April last year and don't want to go through that again. So if you were one of those people, well, you're probably over your skis. You were probably too aggressive. You didn't have enough of that fixed income stuff I mentioned, the bonds, the CDs that keep you afloat and keep you from dipping down as much as the rest of the market did. Okay. Other things to watch, of course, are costs. You want to make sure you're not paying too much with layers of investment costs. Someone came in recently and their total investment cost was about 3%. They had no idea. I always point that out to people because you should always know what you're paying for. So you always want to keep that down. As a benchmark, our cost is 1% of what's being managed. So that's pretty standard. If it gets as high as 3%, you're simply just paying too much. Okay. All right. So with the market, we have a nice continued recovery here expected for 2021. Cash is not trash because yes, there will be some continued volatility. There always is, which could be an opportunity to get in to the market while we're not at all-time highs. So when you do downsize your home and you have that money to put to work and invest after you pay down any kind of debt, well, you want to make sure you're not investing at all-time highs either because, hey, you want to be a bargain buyer, right? You never want to buy retail. You want to buy on the clearance rack when things are on sale. Same applies to investments, okay? So I'm going to share with you a story of my client, Sheila. Now, you may be able to relate to Sheila. She's a widow. She lives in Sharon, and she's a wonderful woman who loves to travel. She's working. She's 61. And, you know, she's looking to really get out as soon as she can. Get out of work and get out of her very large home, which she is just too much house for her. It's worth about 1.2 million in Sharon. Most of all, she's just sick of paying those high taxes. She doesn't have any more kids to benefit from the school system.
Children. Oh, can you guys still hear me? You can. Okay, good.
Yes.
So what she did is she said, well, I want to downsize, but she wanted to get more context as to what downsizing, how that would affect her bottom line, how it would affect her life. Okay. So, and I'm going to give you some statistics on Sheila, and I want you to compare to see how you stand. Okay. She's got about $1 million set aside for savings and investments. Now, $1 million may sound like a lot, but when it comes down to it, $1 million invested middle of the road, nothing too aggressive, nothing too conservative. After taxes, will get someone about $2,500 a month. Okay, so it may not be as much as you're thinking. So she's got $1 million saved. She's got some Social Security. Now, by the way, she's a widow, and I found her extra money through her Social Security. I actually dug up an extra $1,700 a month. She had no clue she was entitled to as a surviving spouse. Let that be a lesson for any widows on the call, or if you have any friends that are, make sure they have spoken to someone who knows the rules in and out. 9 out of 10 times will find people extra money through Social Security alone. And it doesn't just apply to widows, it also applies to divorcees and to married women as well, because you can work off of a spousal benefit, okay? And you can't rely on Social Security to tell you that you are, that money is available to you or that you're eligible for a bigger payment. That's just not how they operate. They are there to simply process and plug along. So happy to chat with anybody about that to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table when it comes to Social Security. So back to Sheila. With her Social Security, an extra $1,700 on top of what she was already collecting. She was getting about $4,000 a month total from Social Security. Plus, she's got her $1 million investment. She had a little bit of a mortgage left, and of course, ideally, before you retire, you don't want any debt, no mortgage. And her money currently, when we plotted everything for her, And by the way, when I plot, I'm not crazy about these 40-page plans. I'm all about one screenshot that tells you exactly where you stand. So when I plotted this out for her finances, she was going to run out of money at 89. Now you may say, hey, 89, not so bad. But for her, she had serious longevity in her family. Her grandparents lived into their mid to late 90s. She's in fantastic health. And let's face it, we're all living longer, okay? The average expected American is going to live into their mid 80s. And frankly, the younger you are, the better the prospects of you living longer. Okay. So she said, well, when I do downsize this mammoth house that I just don't need with all these empty rooms, collecting all this dust I don't want to clean, how is this going to affect where I stand? So she did some shopping around. She's eyeballed a couple of condos and realized, okay, well, for what I need to live into, nothing's cheap these days either. You're selling high, buying high, but it's at least a fair exchange. By the time she clears out her mortgage, she'll have an extra $500,000 to put to work as part of her nest egg. So she won't just have $1 million, she'll also have an extra 500,000 to continue to go to work for her and to be her engine to continue to grow and help her increase her cash flow and generate more wealth for her future and her family if she doesn't end up using all of the money. Now her plan is to make sure her last check bounces. That's her goal, and that's fine. So as it turns out, that 500,000 had a drastic effect on her bottom line, which means a couple things, three things really. One is that it would allow her at 61, if she wanted to retire that day, today, she can just squeeze by and make it. Okay. Number two, if she would like to continue working until 65 at least, it would afford her an extra $2,000 to spend per month. Now think about it, an extra $2,000 a month means a different type of lifestyle. Now Sheila is big into traveling, and I mean not the domestic travel. She's all about the safaris, the European, the Viking cruises, all expenses paid, and this would afford her that extra fun money travel budget where she could go with herself, with some girlfriends, or take the whole family to Disney twice a year. Okay. So it's definitely changes her picture, her future outlook of her next chapter in life when she stops working. The other thing that also it would allow her to do, that extra 500,000, is it more than made sure she would not run out of money even until 95. In fact, we were able to plot her past into her late 90s and still not run out of money. But we also allowed for a nice cushion of money left over at the age of 95 in case she needs that money for any kind of long-term care, okay, that she can have brought into the home, top-notch care brought to her so she can stay comfortable, live the way she wants to live, as long as it's, of course, safe for her. And if she needed to go into the assisted living home for a limited period, she would have a nice cushion there so that she could afford a really nice place. Okay. So again, these decisions, they may not seem like that big of a deal now, but extrapolated 20, 30 years really has a big difference in how your lifestyle shapes out. Okay. All right. So I'm going to open things up here for a Q&A. I purposely we're keeping these nice and tight so you can get the most out of these sessions. Again, if any of you want to battle test yourself to see if you are ready to retire, to see if you're on the right track, if you won't run out of money, if you want to see how downsizing and investing that money will affect your bottom line, to see how much you can spend per month, or if you can retire sooner, send me an email and I will reach back out with you. I'll email you back and we'll figure out a time. We'll do a Zoom session where we just talk one-on-one. It's complimentary. So you can either email me, my email's in the chat. If you can't find that, go ahead and just email me directly and we'll go ahead and take it from there. Okay.
Nora,
Helpful? Good?
thank you,
Good. I'm seeing
Nora.
lots of nods. Again, there's plenty more, plenty of tax questions I'm happy to answer. I'm going to open this up to you so we make this really more personal to any questions you have.
Nora, this is Tracy, and someone asked.
Oh, I'm not hearing you, Tracy, but let me change the audio on my end here.
Let's see, Gladys, I have a question.
Let's see.
Nora, someone asked,
My audio
I
settings.
guess you made a statement about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and someone put in the chat that they were confused about what you said, or so I think they wanted some clarification. I'm not sure exactly what
Can
you
you hear me?
said,
I
but
can't hear you yet,
Can't hear me?
Tracy, but let me just put this up. What I can do is just go ahead and start answering the questions in the chat box. That might be
Okay.
what you were suggesting, Tracy. Yeah.
there was
Okay.
a question from someone.
All right. So we'll take them from the top. And for anyone who doesn't see the chat box, it's if you just put your mouse on the bottom of the screen, you'll see the audio, video, security, participants, and chat box. Click there. And you can add a question yourself. You'll also see my email and contact information at the very top. And you can follow along to the questions I'm going to answer, okay?
Nora, I have a comment.
All right. Oh, great, Ellen, and you included your info too. Excellent.
Nora, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear me? Ellen, can you hear me?
Nora has a pin in hers. I'm gonna text her on the chat.
Okay.
She can't hear.
Okay. So can no one hear me, or is it just
I
Nora?
can hear you.
You hear me? Okay. Nora, are you able to fix the so that you can hear, because it's not just me, other people might want to ask you questions.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Do you hear me?
You can hear me?
Do you hear us?
You can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Let me put it back in there. Yes, I do. Excellent. Okay.
You do hear me? Okay, so two things.
right.
Somebody asked a question about the Johnson and, can you hear me now? Someone asked a question about the
Yes, I
Johnson.
can. Yep.
Someone asked a question in the chat about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, so they just wanted clarification. Sure. And then the second thing is.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The second thing is about Social Security.
Yep, I see the question.
Yeah. The second thing about Social.
Great. Yeah.
I think there's a delay or something. I think the second thing I wanted to just make a comment about Social Security is what Nora said. I went through that with my own mother. My father had passed, and my mother was supposed to collect money from my, because my father had passed, and did all the paperwork, and she didn't collect the money. And then she passed 8 months later. So you do have to do the work. It is work to call Social Security, but in the end, if you are due the money, they will process it. But as Nora said, it takes a little bit of making those calls and filling out some paperwork. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Exactly. Okay, the J&J, I'm not a medical expert, but as I'm reading voraciously about these vaccines, so it's 66% effective, supposed to be mass distributed by April 1st. A classmate of mine at MIT Sloan works for J&J. She gives me a little inside poker. So that's the information I have. I'm not going to get into a medical examination of everything. That's really not my wheelhouse. It's not what we're here to do. But I'll just move on from that. Next question. Okay, yes, Social Security. Oh, and investments too. Yes, I happy to take a look at those. You'll send me your statements, and I'll go through those main categories I just talked about investment-wise. If you're posed correctly for 2021, risk, diversification, cost, I cover all that. I'm taking a look at your statements, and I just tell you what I see.
Does anyone, in terms of
security question?
Nora, so someone wrote something, I guess that's more specific, but does anyone have a general question about investments? Obviously, you're not going to
I have a question on the Social Security that the lady is collecting. How can she be getting her husband's benefits when she's not even collecting yet?
Yes, so I changed the story a little bit to protect her privacy. but the actual client in the real life client is a little bit older than 61. She's 67. So at a real age of 67, that's her full retirement age where she can collect and not get a reduction. Now, depending on the year you're born, if you're born before 1954, your full retirement age is 66. And so as long as you're collecting your benefit then, you can also be receiving the spouse, their surviving widow's benefits and collect 100% of what he or she was collecting at that time and step into that much larger benefit amount. What you can also do is play between your personal benefit and that larger amount.
So that scenario was not correct because she couldn't collect because she wasn't collecting anything, correct? Can you hear me?
Yes, I told you in the story here, she's 61. The real client of mine is 67. The earliest you can collect as a widow is actually is younger than that. So you can start collecting earlier, as early as 60 as a widow. So it really depends on the situation.
But you only can collect.
Now, of course, it's a reduced.
But
it's a reduced amount if you collect sooner.
You only can collect on his benefits if you're collecting Social Security.
Not necessarily true. No, as a widow, it works differently than when you're both alive. You can only collect a spousal benefit if they are already collecting. Okay, so if they aren't collecting, you can't collect off a spousal benefit. Now, the spousal benefit is worth 50% of whatever their full benefit amount is. As a widow, you don't need to wait, of course. Okay, and you step into not 50% of what they're collecting, but you can actually step into 100% of what they were collecting.
Even if you're collecting yourself?
Great question. Even if you're collecting yourself. Now, you would only do that if the amount, of course, is higher. What you could also do is start collecting yours a little bit sooner and then switch to the higher deceased spousal benefit.
So if you're already collecting and it's higher than what you could get from him, you can't get both.
You can't collect both. It's one or the other,
okay.
But you could switch between the two.
So yeah, Ellen, no, I get that. I'm surprised that you got her up to $4,000. That's I can't quite, knowing the numbers I know, I'm surprised that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you spell that out a little more? Yeah.
Absolutely. The husband's amount that he was collecting at the time was about $4,000 a month. So she stepped into that $4,000 a month that he was collecting. Mm-hmm. Now, Helen, for yourself, what you can potentially be doing, and of course, a one-on-one discussion, we can delve in and see if this is possible or not.
Yeah.
But for the sake of everyone else listening, to give you some ideas of how you can find extra money, what you can potentially do, Helen, is collect your personal benefit for now, and then switch to that spousal benefit, surviving spousal benefit, or the opposite. Collect the surviving spousal benefit if it's a smaller amount now, and then switch to your personal benefit, which you allow to continue to increase until you are 70. And at 70, that's the point in time where it's increased the most. Okay, it can balloon up to 132%, not just 100% of what they promised you. Okay?
Also, you're eligible to collect if you were married to a gentleman for 12 years and you were divorced.
No, incorrect. You have to have been married for 10 years and divorced for 2 if your spouse is alive. Okay, this is or dead or ex-spouse. Now, for a widow, it's different. You don't have to have been married for 10 or 12 years. The amount of time you have to have been married, does anyone want to guess? Pretty interesting. It's actually 9 months. Fascinating, huh?
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff they make movies out of.
Somebody put in the chat, Nora, they were questioning, they thought the $3,000 is the most, like the highest level of benefits. They were questioning the 3,000 statement that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's actually incorrect. That's old numbers. The 3,000 was accurate maybe, about 5 years ago, but there's an inflation that added onto Social Security about 1.6% the past couple of years. So it's actually up to about $4,000 right now.
Because don't they cap it at a certain amount? Like even, let's say, yeah.
Yeah, they cap the amount that you pay into FICA, or the amounts that they account as your income history, at about roughly $140,000. So if you make $1 million versus 200,000, it won't make a difference of what your Social Security benefit will be.
So whether you make $1 million a year or 140,000, you should be getting 4,000 in Social Security monthly.
Exactly. Yeah. Now they determine the amount of money you're going to get from Social Security, not by your top 3 years. That's pensions. Okay. When it comes to Social Security, what they do is they take the average of and it's like weighted calculation, which I'll spare you all of to keep you awake. But essentially, they utilize your 35 highest earning years. Now, mind you, this is why for women, since there's a lot of women on the call today, for women, this is why we oftentimes, I'll have couples come in and the wife will say, hey, when she sees her benefit versus her husband's benefit, she'll say, hey, why is mine so much lower than his? We earn about the same amount of money. But oftentimes, if you spend some time working in the home to raise the kids out of the workforce, not paying into FICA, and you don't have 35 earning years, you have a big fat goose egg, which drastically brings down your average and drastically brings down your benefit.
Thank you. Nora, someone asked a question. If you sell your house, let's say you have Ellen sell your house, they're asking, is it best to then purchase a condo or to just go and rent something? So, let's say you're 75, 80 years old, you sold your house. What do you advise in terms of just, financial matters?
I love this question, and it's a super common question, especially right now, because numbers wise, typically the right step is rent for a little bit, wait for this bubble to pop, supposed bubble to pop, and then buy when the market's lower, right? So you sell high and buy low. The 101 of any kind of investing, whether it's real estate or a stock market. But of course, you have to move twice. That's really not appealing to a lot of people. And so, but some people say, well, what if just long-term I either want to rent or long-term do I buy? Here's what I always recommend. Numbers don't lie. So give me what those rent numbers will be. And I will, in that snapshot I had described earlier, I can pop in the difference of renting for that dollar amount you pay per month, plus, any other ancillary costs, versus buying a condo and the condo association fee. And let's compare apples to apples. And let's see where the chips lie, okay? And that will give you a straight answer.
So it really depends on how much the condo is, how much the fee is, how much the renting is. It's not just an easy fix, easy answer.
Exactly, yes. But
what
that's
about
a great question that there's an answer to.
What about the issue of moving to a so-called life care or continuing care, like Newbridge or LaSalle?
Yes, exactly. And I do the same thing. Oftentimes I'll run it for the daughters that are wanting me to do this for their parents. Is very, very common. And yes, and I essentially will run those numbers for you and let you know really how much runway your parents have, how much they can afford. It may not be the Waterstone in Wellesley that is super expensive. It might be somewhere middle of the road. Maybe it's a Brightview in Canton, which is also very nice, lower price point, but I can oftentimes help you gauge what kind of, what caliber assisted living home you can afford.
Anyone else have questions? Let's see, on the page and see if anybody has any questions. Any more questions in the chat?
Okay, let me look through.
Can I share something a minute?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm in that process right now. And I'm going to be selling my house that I've been in for 50 years. And I'm actually moving to Washington, D.C. To be near my daughter. And I'm moving into one of those life plan, continuous care retirement communities. And I'll spare all the details, but one of the beautiful things about it is that they guarantee you care for the rest of your life. They're a nonprofit and they have an endowment. So if you run out of money, they don't kick you out.
Wow.
So
Very nice. Yes.
I think that sounds like a good deal to me.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, it's always important to think of the next step. So if you are in assisted living, you may want to consider make sure they have a nursing home attached or part of the same community, or if you have to go on Medicaid versus private pay, you don't have to uproot yourself. So you really do want your next move to be the last move.
Right.
And part of what I do, because I focus on predominantly really working with women, a lot of the responsibility of helping your parents falls on your shoulders. And so I have an array of contacts, whether it's senior living advisors, placement into assisted living homes that know Massachusetts landscape, at least like the back of their hands. Great contacts like Ellen Dudley to help you with the downsizing of your home. So really the whole spectrum of contacts I'm happy to connect you with. I always say, we have we help you create your village of contacts and advisors.
Anyone have any more questions?
So if we are in the middle and we can't decide whether we want to sell the property or move to a senior committee, if we contacted you, would you be able to help us figure that move out?
Yes, Gladys, I do this pretty frequently. And I think it's just always helpful to give yourself as much information because knowledge is power. And so when I run the numbers for you, you can make a more educated, confident move to know in the back of your mind that, the numbers make sense this way. So you can go ahead and proceed more confidently, whether it's to stay put or go to a next senior living community.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gladys, I'd like to just jump in. I also have a lot of contacts in the senior communities that actually come to your house and talk with you and help you figure out exactly what type of a place you would like to be in. They have vast experience going in and out of all of them.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, if you want to leave your contact information in the chat, I would be happy to reach out to you with their names.
I'll put my contact information in a message.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Want me to give it to you?
Sure.
So my contact,
No, Gladys, not.
Oh, just put it in the chat or send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
You know what, Ellen, do you have the name of that organization that comes into people's houses? Because some people, it's not so easy to use the chat. It's.
Yeah, well, I have several of them. That's why. Let me just put my information and they can write it down.
Okay.
And call me.
Okay.
The other option is if you can't get into the chat, you can always email me and I can forward something to give you the information if it's complicated, because not everybody's comfortable using the chat.
There's different ones that specialize in different parts of the state,
Sure.
Depending on where you want to be. Sherry, could you just repeat the name of the place that you're going in Washington?
Yeah, it's Ingleside, Ingleside, at Rock Creek in Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
They've been around for 106 years. They were started by 6 women in a Presbyterian church. Very interesting place.
So it is an issue, Nora.
Chat?
It is an issue, Nora, that
Can you put it on the chat, please?
Can I what?
Can you put the name on the chat?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
It is an issue for a lot of people if they move to an assisted living. What is that next step? I had a personal issue with my mother. We were looking, just actually ended up being months before she passed. We were looking at an assisted living in the western part of the state in Long Meadow. And when we went there, the question was, if you're a one-person assist, meaning you can stay in the assisted living, if you become a two-person assist, then they would consult the family and then, possibly move someone to the nursing home. So that is something that is a concern for a lot of people. That transition, and assisted livings are notorious for, they can keep you there as long as they can keep you, but if they need that two people to lift you up, then that becomes a nursing home issue. So people need to plan out for that as well.
Good point, Tracy. I'll add this too. Well, two things. One is any questions for Medicare or Medicaid too, happy to answer, and what those pay for. And supplementary plans, happy to walk anyone through those. What I notice for a lot of clients is that they're often sitting on insurance that they could utilize to help pay for assisted living, long-term care needs, or nursing home needs. For instance, if you or a parent has a older whole life insurance policy, which means there's this thing called a cash value in it. Okay. If there's a cash value in it, it means it's been accruing some extra money and it's older, especially if it's over about $25,000. And what you can do, it's very neat, what you can do with these older insurance policies, if you have one lying around, which many of you probably do, is you can take it and essentially it says, if I have a mortgage and I'm paying 7% interest, what would you tell me? What would you tell me if I'm paying 7% of my mortgage interest?
Oh, I hear. Very high.
It's very high. Oh my gosh, where you been? Refi. So same thing applies for old insurance policies, because we're all living longer. The actuarial tables have changed. So what you can do is put these old insurance policies you already have out to bid, okay, and then have the insurers, and I do this for clients all the time, and have the insurer and carriers bid and try to get you a better policy, exchange you into a better policies, upgrade you, so that one, you have a likely bigger death benefit in many cases. Two, you can use that pocket of money of death benefit for any long-term care needs, okay? And it ends up being a paid-up policy, which means you don't have to pay any more premiums again. And I know it sounds way too good to be true. The reason this is possible is because we're all living longer, and the insurance industry in the past decade has made some major changes. So it's just like refining an old mortgage. If you have this old policy lying around and you want to see if you're sitting on some money and you can make more use,
which you have, shoot me an email. Let's be in touch and let's see if you can better utilize what you already have.
Nora, can you?
And it's much cheaper than.
I think you froze.
Okay. Oh, can you still hear me though?
We hear you now. You froze for a minute. Yep.
Okay. I'm saying that doing that, exchanging into one of these hybrid policies that, again, you don't pay any more money into and doesn't cost you anything because you're using the cash value that was in your old policy. That's a much more efficient way of getting your future potential long-term care expenses paid for versus buying long-term care insurance, which is super, super expensive. And the older you get, the more expensive it becomes.
So I actually wanted to ask you about long-term health insurance. I have a good friend on the North Shore, and her parents had a high-end long-term care policy. And when she needed it, when her parents needed it, my friend did a lot of work to try to put that into play. I mean, they paid into the policy all along, but to actually get it to pay for an aide who came into their condo or for different things, it was a lot of aggravation on her part. So what are your thoughts about these long-term policies, and do you recommend them, or should you only get the highest level? Like, what are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm a bigger fan of getting a hybrid like I described, where if you don't end up needing the long-term care, which hopefully you don't, may we all go in our sleep quickly. If you don't end up needing that long-term care, and traditional long-term care, you don't get anything back. No beneficiary gets any money of what you paid in back. So if you don't use it, you lose it. But with these hybrids, which are becoming more and more popular, you'll have a long-term care ability to use that money for long-term care. Or if you don't use the money, or you only use a little bit of it, the leftover amount will be used as a death benefit that will go to a beneficiary, perhaps a spouse, perhaps a child. You get the idea.
And so where should people look should they look for the insurance companies for the long-term care? Where do they find these hybrid policies?
Yep. So you can contact me. I'm a what's called a free agent. So I'm not bounded by any one particular insurance company. I can go and shop through all of the high quality carriers out there to help find you the one that has the best offer. That will give you the highest death benefit.
Do you have any names of companies that you think have done very well with that?
So I am contact and use all carriers that are out there. So it really just depends on, literally comes down to your date of birth. If you prioritize long-term care over a higher death benefit, or maybe a higher death benefit over less long-term care, and then I can go ahead and get you the right policy that's most suitable for you. But I'm also an insurance agent, so I can get you that, let you know what your options are for that.
Gotcha. Anyone else have questions? I don't see any more questions in the chat. Any more questions? Let's see, there is a question that someone just wrote. I have a friend who just moved there in February, so I'm not sure where the there is. But sadly, they made little effort to substitute for the activities that had to be canceled due to COVID. So I think, I'm not sure what the there is in the chat, but I just know just from talking to people, and Nora, I'm sure knows more, that a lot of places did have to cancel these activities because they couldn't have people congregating in a communal area. But Nora, what are your thoughts?
Yes. And of course, it's a concern of being in these assisted living homes, which in some cases are petri dishes for COVID to spread rampant, and it's very sad what's happening. All the more reason to get vaccinated, and all the more reason to look forward to the second half of the year as more of us are vaccinated and we can put all this COVID nonsense behind us. But I think that's a good place to stop and just say, now's a good time to really assess yourself financially when it comes to your investments, be it real estate, be it investments, to really see where you stand and see if you should be making any other ideas or any other moves to make smarter decisions for your future.
I guess the person was referring to the assisted living in Washington. That's what it was about. And this person said, gee, maybe during COVID, try not to move at this particular time into an assisted living because of the issue. Although that said, sometimes people need, it may be a personal issue from family to family. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nora. This was very helpful, and I hope everyone enjoyed. And thank you, Ellen, for sponsoring this. Next week, and I think people have been emailing me during this, people are very excited about the next presentation, February 9th, which is next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Guest speaker Eve Ward of Bond and DeVoe, Declutter Your Home and Your Life. And I'm sure that all of us can take a lesson on decluttering, even if you have the most streamlined home, the most modern home. I'm sure there's a little clutter somewhere, but probably for most of us, we have the tchotchkes on every shelf like I do and things all around. So I'm sure we can take some advice for that. So that's next week. And I will send out a reminder email. If you are a guest and you're not on my email, just stay afterwards and I'll take your email and I'll send you the flyer unless you're a contact of Ellen, and Ellen can send you the flyer as well. Nora, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I know you put your contact information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, everyone.
I think it's very empowering for a lot of women to have a female financial advisor, so I appreciate the talk. Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
everybody. And for those of us who attend our Memory Cafe is in 2 days on Thursday at 1 o'clock. We have a sing-along and we have our caregiver support group. And just look at the flyer. If you have any questions, you can always give me a call. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on this
Thank you.
snowy day.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ellen, and thank you, Nora, so
Bye.
much for giving your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sean, as well.
Jerry, I
Yeah.
was asking if you have anyone assisting you already.
No, I don't. I'm just beginning at the process. All this happened very fast because I just went through 6 months when I moved my sister, who lived right outside of Northampton, who was diagnosed with moderate dementia. So we were in a kind of crisis mode in terms of selling her house and getting her into an assisted living place near her stepson up in New Paltz, New York. So my lesson from that was that I wasn't going to wait until I was in a crisis mode.
Very smart.
So when I came back, we started looking at places. My daughter and I both independently found this place on the web, and we thought, this looks pretty interesting. Long story short, I called, I sent in an application to be on the wait list. A week later, when they called to confirm that I was on the wait list, I asked whether my daughter and stepson could visit, because they said, do you want us to visit, Mom? And he said, sure. And so 2 days later, they visited. We did a Zoom thing and I saw everything, fell in love with an apartment. The apartment wasn't available. It was on hold. And then that was Saturday. And then Monday, he called and said I could have the apartment if I wanted it, because the woman took a different apartment. So I'm just at the beginning of that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And what do you do? You're with a realty? You're with Kelly Williams?
yes.
Yeah.
Keller Williams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I might be in touch with you, Ellen. I've got a couple of, I have had one realtor come. I have an appointment with another one coming. I'm trying to educate myself in terms of how to.
Absolutely. Yeah, you should. That's a
But,
great idea.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
In terms of the financial stuff, I've had the same financial advisor since 1991, and she has me set up so well. It's like
Wonderful.
everything that you said, she's done.
Great.
So,
Great.
but it's nice to confirm that there are other people that do that too. Okay. All righty.
Thank you. Reach out
Yeah.
if we can help in any way.
I will.
I
Thanks
was
a lot.
wondering, what place did you find that you like so much?
It's called Ingleside at Rock Creek. I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And then I forget that when you push enter, it sends the chat. So there's a couple more. One of them says address, and then one of them actually has the address of the place.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I think you sent the address just privately to me instead of to the whole group.
Oh, okay.
But I can copy it and
But that's in Washington, correct?
It's in Washington, D.C., which is where my daughter lived. My daughter and her husband live there.
Oh, so that's
It's about 15 minutes driving from their house. Of course, anybody who would move to DC at this moment in time is out of their mind anyway, but never mind that.
Yeah.
But I've been very, they've been very responsive, and we've had nothing but very positive interactions from them. And like I say, they have the whole gamut, so you can go from independent living to assisted living to memory care to skilled care to long-term care. And I've got long-term care insurance. And so.
Well, the good news is that it sounds like it's near your daughter. It's 15
Right.
minutes away. That's more
Yeah.
important than anything, because then you have someone
No.
who's
Yeah.
advocating
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, no. I had always told her that when the time came when I was ready to leave my house, I would move wherever she was, because long distance care of your parents. I been there, done that, don't recommend it. And so it just came up a little faster than I thought it would, but because they have a wait list at this place, and you could wait. The independent living things, people tend to move in there in their 70s and they stay there a long time, so the apartments don't become available that often. And so I thought, combined with the fact that COVID-19 has taken away everything that I like about my life here except my house. I don't go to plays, I don't go to my friends, I don't go to work. I thought, do it.
You're so smart to do it before you have to. I wish my parents were listening to this, because I tell them that pretty much every day.
Yeah, well, tell them to call me, But no, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world to me, and like I say, having just been through that with my sister, and getting her squared away in an assisted living place and moving while she had dementia was the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
Can I ask you approximately how old you are?
You want to guess?
43.
No.
I'm 80.
Really?
I'm
Wow.
80 years old. Yeah.
I am 80 also. I
Yeah.
would say you look younger than me. That's why
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's because I went out and shoveled snow and I didn't take a shower
Okay.
yet.
yeah, you look good for 80.
You
Yeah.
look great. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I attribute that partially to the fact that I ran 25 miles a week for 40 years.
Wow.
And I just started my 21st year of doing Bikram hot yoga 3 or 4 days a week.
Oh my God. You're
Wow.
amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I tell people this not to brag. I mean, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I mean, I had endometrial cancer, 35 years ago. And I mean, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. You can only control so many things, but the things that you can control are worth controlling. And one of them is physical exercise, and another one is
Yeah.
diet, as everybody
Right.
says over and over again. And I like to think that I'm a poster child of proving that.
You know what? So many of our participants, before we were on Zoom when we came to the temple, I was always just amazed at everybody's story. And we have people in their 90s that were coming to the synagogue. They were driving there, very sharp, still taking care of their homes. I know someone who's 95 years old, and she walks up the steps from the first floor to her level.
Right.
Lives there. Her daughter lives like on the bottom level of a 2-family
Right.
home. It's very impressive. And there are people that are much younger, absolutely, that don't take care of themselves, probably half your age, that could need a boost. So it's impressive.
Well, and then there are sadly people like my sister who also, she and I ran together a good bit of those 40 years, and took care of herself as best, as one should. And at the age of 71 has moderate dementia. What are you going to do?
Is your sister local? Is she local?
No, she lived right outside of Northampton in Williamsburg, Massachusetts, about 100 miles west.
But she passed. You said she passed?
Pardon?
Did she?
No, she's in an assisted living facility out there now. Yeah. And that it's a struggle. And with COVID-19, that has been a real challenge because, I couldn't go with her and help her move in, Nobody can go in and help her move in. And so it's
been very,
it is what it is.
Very challenging for people. I
Yeah.
know so many stories, whether it's a sister or a parent or a spouse, of people that wanted to help their parent. Let's say they went to rehab or the hospital. They could not go in because of COVID.
Yeah.
But those are the rules. They're trying to protect the people inside. So.
Right.
Thank you, everyone. We have to
challenge for. Well, this has been great. My own private little session here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Nora, and thank you, Ellen. And we'll see everybody next week at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.